Hey everybody, this is Bandor again, and this is part 2 of our series of videos on using Blender and Substance Painter to texture 3D objects and then bring them into Second Life. This part is really about how to set up your files inside of Substance Painter so that we can start working with them. So let's go over to Substance Painter. If you remember in the last video, we set up the files in Blender by adding UV maps to every part and then having uniquely named materials for each of the parts. And now we're going to show you why that's important. So this is Substance Painter. First thing we want to do is create a new project. So you go up to File, click New, and the New Project panel opens. At the very top you have a thing for selecting a template. Templates are a way to tell Substance Painter which tool you're targeting for your 3D models. And it lists a whole bunch of different ones. Everything from, I don't know, it's just a whole bunch of them. So ASM, PBR, Dota, Keyshot, Lens Studio, Maxwell, Unity Engine, Spark, a lot of different 3D platforms. So, and all of them require different map files, and the map files are set up differently. Some use roughness, some use metallic, some use glossiness. It just depends on the tool. And Second Life only has 3: diffuse, normal, and specular. And those 3 have to be produced a certain way. So we need to find a template here that is going to give us all of the parts that we need and more, because they all have more than Second Life, but at least has the things that we need for Second Life. And experience has shown, and watching other videos and learning from talking to people, the one that I find that works the best for me is the last one on the list, which is called V-Ray Metallic Specular Glossiness Starter Assets. So I picked that template, and then we're going to set up the file using that. Next thing is you click Select to pick the file that we exported from Blender, which was this one right here, Woodcloth Chair 6 3D object, not the DAE file. This is the FBX one. So we're going to pick that one and hit Open. Then I want to use a resolution that's going to give me a high resolution source for my images, but that's not too high, which causes everything to get really slow and be painful to work with. So let's pick 2048. I find I get the best results with that. And then the normal map format, you need to make sure it's set to OpenGL. In older versions of Substance Painter, I found that DirectX was set by default, and I had to change it every single time. But on this new version, 2022, what I'm finding is that OpenGL seems to be the default, which is interesting. So that may not be your experience. So make sure you pick OpenGL, because that's what Second Life uses. If you don't, what happens when you generate the normals and you apply the normals to your models in Second Life, normals are used to apply a bumpiness to the surface of your texture, and it inverts it. So things that should be raised are actually lowered, and things that are lowered will end up raised. So if you see that, you know you have your normals inverted. So go ahead and use OpenGL. The rest of this doesn't matter, so go ahead and click OK. Now you can see there's our chair from Blender. To navigate around, you want to hold down the Alt key and hold down the left Shift key. That lets you rotate the view around your object. And you can hold down the Alt key, hold down the middle mouse button to pan around like this. So that's just some quick navigation tools. Over here in the upper right hand corner, you see the list of texture sets. These are what Substance Painter sees as the parts of the model that we're going to work with. And these are the names that we gave the materials in Blender when we set that up in the last video. So these are the list of parts, and you can turn them off by just clicking on the eye to hide them. Turn it back on, you can see them again. You can also scroll down here, and this layers is just like a layer in Photoshop. These are the layers of the things that we've been painting on our model, and so far we don't have anything on there, so it's empty. But right next to the layers is this button, this tab called Texture Set Settings. We need to click on that, and we need to scroll down until you see a button that says Bake Mesh Maps in the Mesh Maps section. So if you notice our model right now, it's pretty plain. It looks just like it was in Blender. It's just blank white. There's really hardly any shadows here. So we're going to do this Bake Mesh Maps. But before we do that, we want to make sure we set up our lighting. And our lighting is not in there. It's over here on the right hand side. There's a button called display settings. So if you click that and open up the display settings panel, you want to scroll down till you see environment settings, and you're going to pick the environment map, which is an HDRI image, which acts as the light source for this. It sets the lights for the room based on an image. And normally these images, if you look, there's a whole bunch of them in here. They put light all around the object, but one side is brighter than the rest, and that's the side that's the front of your object. That means the back is going to be darker. Well, if this is going to be against a wall, you might not care, but if it's out in the middle of the room, you don't want that. You don't want it to be darker on one side. It's going to look weird. So you need to use what's called a two-sided panorama or a two-sided HDRI, and I'll make another video that shows how to do that, but I've already made this one. And so you just click on it to apply it. It's a two-sided thing. It changed the lighting, and then it's ready to go. So you can close this, then go back to your bake mesh maps, click that button. This panel is going to open up. I'm just going to fly through this so you can see what to do, and just trust me on this. So the output size, you need to change that to match the size that we wanted, which is 2048. Dilation width, you leave that alone, but I do turn on apply diffusion, and I check use low poly mesh as high poly mesh. I check that box, and then I go ahead and define where's my high poly mesh, which is the same one that I put in when I created the project. So pick it again. I know that's weird, and the reason for this is before I did that, all of these had exclamation marks on it saying that something was missing, and these are the maps that Substance Painter needs to be able to do the best job that it can. And if parts are missing, it can't create all of the relationships and all of the different maps, so it's not going to look as good as it possibly could. So it needs both in order to turn those from exclamation points into this little cube symbol, which means we are ready to go. So that's it. You just add that here, and then on the left side we're going to go down to the Ambient Occlusion tab, click that, and then we're going to increase the quality of the ray count from 64 to 256. We're going to turn on ground plane. What the ground plane does is it tells Substance Painter that we are sitting on the ground or sitting on an object, so it needs to create ambient occlusion for where the object touches the ground. So there'll be shadow from here that kind of fades away as it goes up, and there'll be shadow on the ground down here where it meets the leg and fades away as it gets further away from that. Without that, you won't have that, and your eye will notice that there's something missing. So turn that on. And then we want to make sure that we apply this to all the parts, because right now it's only affecting arm left, which is the one I have selected, and I want it for everything, so you click apply to all. Next you go down to curvature. We're going to do the same thing, but there is nothing for a ground plane here. It's just the secondary rays. So just take secondary rays, slide all the way to the right, hit apply to all. Then we're going to go down to thickness, and we're going to do the same thing again. Slide it all the way over and hit it apply to all. That's the only three you need to change. The rest of them don't have that feature, so you don't need to worry about it. Now we're ready to bake these and create the mesh maps, and to do that you just click the button over here that says bake selected textures. Now it's going to run. It's going to take a while, and so I'm just going to pause the video while that happens, and I'll come back on when it's done. Okay, it's been a couple of minutes and it finished. You can see it says it's 100% complete, so let's close that. Now you can see it looks way better. It looks really, really good. But I'll let you in on a little trick if you want to see it look even better. Go up to your display settings, scroll down until you see shadows, and turn on shadows. Now it actually renders shadows on it that look really cool. You can see it's building that as it goes. I mean, that looks pretty amazing to me. So it's ready to start texturing. It's also ready for us to pull some of this information out into Second Life, like the ambient occlusion files. It's a good thing at this point, before you start texturing, is to save out your blank AO files that you can then take into Photoshop or you can take into Second Life and use. So that'll be what we do in the next step. We'll create our AO files and bring the model and the AO files into Second Life and combine them. And so that's this for this video. This is part 2, and appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in part 3.